that. I'm talking about when we ride. You deal with visual film.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of WWD What Went Down. Today we're going to be talking about the results of the Chicago Bears Los Angeles Chargers game that took place on Sunday Night Football. Let's get into the fantasy side of things. As always, you bunch of dirty dildos, especially if you like taking the dildos in the ass, like one of you. Anyway, let's get right into it. First of all, Dictatorship and myself didn't have anybody, so we'll just move on to Toxic and Karen's husband. Toxic had Justin Herbert, who had a pretty solid night. He did pretty damn good, if I don't say so myself. He had 3 touchdown passes, 298 yards. He also had a rushing yard. That really carried his night. But overall, this is almost as good of a performance as you could ever expect. The Bears defense just kind of rolled over and let Justin Herbert have their way with him, or have his way with him. And yeah, overall, it was a very bad night for the Bears defense, but Herbert was able to just take advantage of that defense to the absolute fullest. This was maybe his best game in terms of real life of all season. He had a good week 3, don't get me wrong, but he still didn't play mistake-free football in that game. But this game tonight, he pretty much did everything almost fucking perfectly. And yeah, this was a very good sign if you're Toxic. Granted, the Bears defense is ass, but either way, Herbert didn't make a single mistake, and that's exactly what you're hoping to see if you're Toxic. And that definitely helped him in contributing towards his win towards Karen's husband. Toxic also had Kenneth Murray. Um, Kenneth Murray's actually been pretty surprising to me. I thought he would start falling off with the return of Eric Kendricks. Now, he might not be getting 20 points plus per week anymore, but even with Kendricks having a monster game, as we'll talk about when we get to B-Dog, Kenneth Murray is still getting plenty of volume. He's still going out there and getting a good 9, 8, 10 sacks, or not sacks, tackles per game. He's getting pretty much all you need to have a consistent linebacker. This guy might actually be startable for the rest of the year. One way or another, he's figuring out ways to go out there and make tackles. He's figuring out ways to go out there and make plays. So overall, I can't complain if you wanted to go and start starting him. But I will warn you, there also is the return of Derwin James that could start negatively affecting him as well. Derwin James just returned off of an injury. So he's slowly going to be progressively taking more tackles away and shit like that throughout the defense, I think, as the weeks come up. But either way, Murray seems like he's still staying on it. So for now, he seems pretty good. I had my concerns, but I got to admit, I'm starting to change my mind. Definitely helped towards it's definitely helping towards your bench. He was looking like a very good depth option if you're Toxic. Like I said, he's probably startable. Then we'll look at Karen's husband, who had Deontay Foreman. Now, if you're pussy, whenever we were discussing the previous week's bet, this right here is exactly why I was warning you to not take Deontay Foreman on any bets, because sure, he might have had those 2 good weeks, but you are going to see weeks where he just completely gets a dissolved workload, can't get anything going on the ground, only gets 34 yards, and that's his night. He had a catch for 2 yards. So overall, from a fantasy point of view, this wasn't a good night. From a real life point of view, it was okay, I guess you can say. He got about a bit over 4 yards per carry. Excuse me, he had a little bit over 4 yards per carry, but other than that, you can't really say much positive here. He didn't get too much in terms of touchdown. He didn't get any touchdowns. The O-line got bullied. Well, with the exception of Darnell Wright, he did pretty good. But overall, the run game just couldn't really get going like they have been in games past, and this was my worry. Because if the Bears don't have any sort of passing game is when the running game really starts to take a hit, as I warned Pussy. But overall, this was definitely not helping Karen's husband. And I would actually say Deontay Foreman is probably cuttable at this point in time in the season, just because Khalil Herbert's going to come back sooner than later, and Rashawn Johnson has more reason to start taking more snaps than Deontay Foreman. Hell, I believe he got outplayed by Darrington Evans in this game. I could be wrong. I'd have to look at the snap count, but from what I noticed, Darrington Evans was pretty much the one making all the big plays happen. Then you also had Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet, he did okay. Well, he actually did pretty good, but he did pretty damn good. 10 catches for 79 yards. I was looking at the week before, but yeah, he had 10 catches for 79 yards. That's pretty much as good of a fantasy night as you could ask for. That's basically Travis Kelce numbers right there, minus a touchdown. Yeah, this was a fantastic night for Cole Kmet. You're very happy with this. I think this is a pretty good second tight end option. I know you just had Zach Ertz get hurt if you're Karen's husband. I don't think you're in very bad hands at all with Cole Kmet going into the rest of the season. He's had a few bad weeks with the entrance of Tyson Bagent. But other than that, especially if Fields comes back, I do think you'll be very happy with this tight end option if you're Karen's husband. This definitely helped in his loss against Toxic, but at least, it wasn't Cole Kmet's fault. But yeah, he did pretty damn good tonight for what it's worth. Pretty much probably the only guy I can say on that Bears offense that actually did good. But either way, you're happy to see that, at least if you're Karen's husband, so it's not a total loss against Toxic. Next up, we'll look at Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled, who had Kingpin himself, Tyson Bagent. Uh, Here's the thing. He didn't play good, I'll be the first to admit, but he is a rookie quarterback who was undrafted free agent from Division II college football. I don't think people could have expected that he was actually going to go out there and fucking outplay Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert. I think that was a little unrealistic. He did go into the game and immediately throw a fucking thunderbolt to Darnell Mooney for a 40-yard gain, but yeah, it was kind of struggle city from there. He threw two picks. He didn't really have anything in terms of the rushing game outside of the touchdown, but he had 232 passing yards. Um, I do think this guy isn't like elite or anything like that, but at the same time, I am gonna tell you that if you watch that game, it wasn't entirely his fault. There were a lot of times where the O line would fuck him over, or Khalil Mack would just be coming in to shove his Mac in his face. You name it. There were so many times he was pressured when he really didn't need to be. Granted, he definitely made a lot of mistakes, like I said, but for what it's worth, he didn't do that great overall. Um, but in terms of the fantasy side of things, only 13 points. I guess you can say he was a pick up and play type guy, where at least he wasn't putting up Daniel Jones level of 2 points. But for the position he's in the NFL, I'd say he's looked pretty damn impressive overall, even though these weren't good games by any means. These are kind of shit, but for where the Bears had him, he's definitely looking like a good backup. Um, and then what else did we have? We had Josh Palmer for Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled. Do not be concerned in the slightest if you're scrambled here. He did get hurt mid game against the Bears here. He had 3 catches for 24 yards. I know that's not great, but he did get hurt. He was playing through an injury for the entire game after that. So I'd say wait another week or two if he is still continuing this trend of not producing too much. Then I'd say start to be a little concerned and maybe think about a different option. But for now, don't panic at all. Just wait. Within a few weeks, I think he'll go back to putting up those big weeks like you saw in the past few weeks. And I don't think this is a concern at all for Scramble, just an unfortunate week. Then we'll go ahead and look at Pussy against Mr. Steeler Girl. Now, Pussy decided to commit a fucking hate crime. He committed the rape of Nan King on Mr. Steeler Girl. First of all, he had Keenan Allen. Now, for as much as I joke about Keenan Allen being ass, I think his projection was definitely a little ridiculous. I don't think he should be projected 20 points per game. I think realistically he's going to be getting like 15 points per game. Sometimes you might get a touchdown that can get him to 20, but I don't think he's always going to be getting those 20-point weeks as you see throughout the season. He's had a few of them, especially whenever Williams was there to draw a lot of the coverage, but I don't think he's going to have that many like insane weeks like Yahoo seems to be projecting him. But either way, he definitely had a solid night, though. 8 catches for 69 yards, no touchdown or anything like that, but definitely a solid night if you're Pussy. It's definitely a little bit in the red because of how ridiculously high Yahoo has him projected, but I do think he went out there and hit around where he should be projected, at least in my opinion. Not a bad night at all, but since he was projected so high, it is a little disappointing, but overall, you're not complaining if you're Pussy. Um, then you also had Derwin James. Like I said, with Toxic, Derwin James is now starting to pick things up a little bit. I believe he had an interception, if I'm not mistaken. He had 4 tackles solo, a tackle assist, and an interception against the Lord and the Savior himself, Tyson Bagent. This was an okay night. He might slowly start getting more tackles. He also had a pass deflect, by the way. Um, he might progressively start doing more on this defense as the week goes on. But for now, it's a pretty good week, but he's not necessarily hitting that like 20 points he was hitting at the beginning of the season or like last season, but it's a pretty good week overall for what it's worth. And Pussy's definitely not complaining. His guys are both guys that did good, but just didn't really live up to the projections because they're both over projected to hell and back, in my opinion. Mr. Steeler Girl had Tremaine Edmonds. Now, Tremaine Edmonds got hurt very early in the game. I'm not certain how bad this injury is going to be. They said it's not going to be a season-ending injury, but that could mean that he were to miss time soon with these Bears. I don't know what that injury is going to entail. Whatever you do, if you're Mr. Steeler Girl, you probably don't want to drop a linebacker like this because he is one of the better options out there. But with Tremaine Edmonds now getting hurt, that opens the door for another player on that Bears defense to start racking up a shit ton of tackles. Either way, Tremaine Edmonds went out there and he only had one tackle, so I can't really say too much because he did get hurt. Whatever you do, if you're Steeler, don't drop him because unless he like gets put on IR or something. But either way, he's definitely a very good linebacker, like I said. Next up, we'll take a look at Big Yawners and Justin Likes Kids. Big Yawners had Roshan Johnson, who went out there and had a mediocre week compared to what he's projected. 6 carries for 21 yards isn't great. He had 3 catches, at least that is pretty good, but only for 10 yards. He was returning from an injury, to be fair, so he didn't play well in real life, but at least he's getting targets, at least he's getting snaps. That's good. That's a good sign going forward, but he did not play well in terms of real life, like I said. Maybe it's just because of the injury. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But overall, it's an okay performance for what he's projected. I do think he'll progressively start working towards getting more snaps. The only reason his points were so low before he actually got hurt was he was playing through an injury at the beginning of the season, which led to him getting hurt for a few weeks. So just be patient with this guy. I think by the end of the year, he could be a full-on startable running back in fantasy. But for now, don't go in there and start him expecting him to win you games because right now you're just kind of hoping the Bears start progressively using him more. He is still better than guys on free agency. He does still have that higher upside. But for now, you just got to be patient with him if you're Big Yawners. Then we'll move over to Justin Likes Kids, who had DJ Moore. DJ Moore had an okay night. He did what he could with Tyson Bagent, who was having a struggling game. 4 catches for 55 yards. It's an okay night. This is another example of a guy who shouldn't have been projected as high as he was with that quarterback, with Tyson Bagent at least. He's a very good wide receiver in real life, but you can only do so much whenever you have a backup undrafted free agent quarterback and a pretty shitty offensive line outside of Darnell Wright and Tevin Jenkins. But overall, I wouldn't be concerned about this if you're Justin Likes Kids, at least until Fields comes back. If DJ Moore's putting up 9 points per game when Fields comes back, that might be a little concerning, but I don't think he will. Then we'll go right ahead and look at TJ Edwards. TJ Edwards is basically the new Roquan Smith in Chicago. 31 fucking points. This is his new season high. Total of 13 tackles. He had a fumble recovery as well. He also had 2 tackles for loss. Dude did fantastic. Pretty much the simplest way to say this is, this guy is arguably the number 1 linebacker in all of fantasy. There's a few guys you could make an argument over him for, but other than that, he's looked fucking amazing this season. He's getting tackles left and right. He had a bit of a bad week against the Raiders, but outside of that, this dude has been fucking ridiculous. Definitely one of the better picks in all of fantasy this season when it comes to the defensive side of the ball here. And then you also had Eric Kendricks down here. I've been warning you guys for weeks. Eventually, Eric Kendricks would come to life, and he sure enough has started doing that with 20 points per game over the past 2 weeks. 14 points the first week he came back. Like I said, this guy is probably going to be one of the better linebackers out there. It was just a matter of how long it took him to wake up. 10 tackles this week. He's progressively getting better and better on a consistent basis. 8, 9, 10 tackles for each of the last 3 weeks. He had a pass deflect. This guy is pretty much all over the place. He's one of the best linebackers in the league when it comes to tackling. And he's pretty much one of the smartest, too. He just knows how to get to the ball and make plays happen. This is definitely a very good linebacker. I think Justin Likes Kids is very fucking stacked at the linebacker room overall and is looking happy about everything, with the exception of DJ Moore. But either way, the reason he lost this game certainly wasn't because of those fellas. They tried their best. Then we'll look at J-Bay. J-Bay's the last guy we have on here before we move on to the game side of things. Who had Austin Eckler? Austin Eckler did pretty solid. He had well, he didn't do good in terms of real life, but in terms of fantasy, he did pretty good. He had 15 carries for 29 yards, which is atrocious, which isn't even 2 yards per carry. That is horrible against the Bears defense, which fucking sucks. But he did have 7 catches for 94 yards and a touchdown, which clutched up his night. That was very fucking good. Eckler's, to his credit, has always been a receiving back, not a power back or anything like that. So that's kind of excusable for why he couldn't get the run game going. But he did do what he's good at, and that's his catches for yards and a touchdown. He did very fucking good overall. If J-Bay were to ever set his team, I think he's looking. I think this is overall a step in the right direction, but Eckler has definitely been a disappointment so far this season, not just from the injury, but even when he came back, he started struggling a bit. But we'll have to wait and see how he does to remain the season, or to end the season. And J-Bay also had Jalen Hawkins. He didn't do anything. 9 times out of 10, Jalen Hawkins isn't going to do anything, but he had a few tackles earlier in the season, so I just figured I'd mention it. He did absolutely fucking nothing. Just so you guys know. Then we'll look at the game side of things, of course, and we'll kick things off with Tyson Bagent. Like I said, I think Bagent, the game plan wasn't to have him go out there and be anything special. The game plan looked like they were trying to get him a lot of chunk yards throughout the entire game. Whether it was through checkdowns or trying to get just find free yards. A lot of his yards and completions did come from garbage time. He was really struggling early game, but he went 25 for 37, 232 yards. I know he did throw those 2 interceptions, but for his position, like I already said, was pretty impressive. The Chargers defense was just fucking lights out tonight, especially against him. Deontay Foreman had an okay game running, 9 for 34. Rashawn Johnson had a slightly less okay game running, 6 for 21. Darlington Evans outplayed both of them, 4 for 18 and a touchdown. Tyson Bagent had a rushing touchdown as well. The receiving, Cole Kmet led the receiving room with 10 catches for 79 yards. Definitely the true wide receiver one there, even though he's a tight end. DJ Moore had 4 catches for 55 yards. Darnell Mooney had the catch for 41 yards at the beginning of the game and just was quiet the rest of the night. And then Rashawn Johnson had the 3 catches for 10 yards. And other than that, there wasn't really much worth mentioning. Foreman had a catch, but yeah, there isn't really much fantasy relevant there outside of that. The main tackler was actually a mix of T.J. Edwards and I think it's Tyreek Stevenson is how you pronounce it. Um, Stevenson has actually been getting a lot of tackles throughout these games. It's not because he's a good tackler. It's because he just gets fucking bullied on these routes, and then he has to make all the tackles to make up for it. But then you have Jack Sanborn, who is definitely looking like a certain good option. In terms of who's going to start getting a lot of tackles, depending on what happens with Tremaine Edmonds. If Tremaine Edmonds were to miss time, then maybe Jack Sanborn might be someone to keep an eye out for. Either way, that's pretty much it in terms of what was worth mentioning with the tackles. And there wasn't really any sacks or interceptions because the Bears suck. But either way, that's about it that I can really think of that would be worth mentioning on the Bears side of things. Yeah, the Bears overall, to sum up the night, the defense got bullied, the offense got bullied, the coaches suck. Nothing really looked good outside of Cole Kmet, and then T.J. Edwards, I'd say. And other than that, yeah, that's about it. Like, the Bears just played like shit. And we'll look at the Chargers. Herbert had almost as good of a night as you could ask for. 3 passing touchdowns, 31 for 40, hitting almost 75%, or actually over 75% of his targets overall. Very good night, almost 300 yards. That's about as much as you can ask of him. In terms of the run game, Eckler just couldn't get anything going. Actually got outplayed by Josh Kelly, so that's definitely a little bit concerning. But like I said, he definitely made up for it in the receiving game. 7 catches for 94 yards, a touchdown. Keenan Allen at 8 catches for 69 yards. Quentin Johnston decided to wake up tonight. He had 5 catches for 50 yards. Do I think he'll do that every night? I don't know. I honestly can't tell you. The guy was supposed to have an immediate impact on this offense even before Mike Williams got hurt and just hasn't done anything all season. So I don't know. I want to say he will, but I can't promise you guys anything. I think this is more of a Josh Palmer getting hurt situation, to be honest, but guess we'll have to wait and see. Donald Parham had 4 catches for 43 yards and a touchdown. He's their backup tight end who is replacing Gerald Everett tonight. And I don't know who Fehoko is. I've never heard of the name in my life, to be honest, but he did have a touchdown. It's probably one of their backup tight ends. And then we'll look at the defensive side of things. You had Eric Kendricks, who's the main tackler. Kenneth Murray had quite a fair share himself. Derwin James had an interception. Joey Bosa, who had a sack. I don't think Khalil Mack actually had a sack, but he was getting a lot of fucking pressure over on Tyson Bagent for pretty much the entire game. So was Bosa. Um, then I think that's Jawan Taylor who had an interception as well for the Chargers. Um, and overall, yeah, this was a very good night for the Chargers around the board. Pretty much everything they did around the board looked good. Their corners looked good. Their safeties looked good. Their linebackers, their D line, their offense, their receivers looked good. Um, Pretty much around the board, the only thing bad I can say about the Chargers was Austin Eckler with the struggling run game. But outside of that, this was just one of those games where the Chargers were simply a better football team than the Bears for what the Bears had to offer. And it mostly comes down to inexperience at the QB and just we don't have a defense to offer. We have our linebackers, and that's about it when it comes to the Bears. But the Chargers are at least a well rounded team that have a pretty damn strong offense and a defense that can at least hold their own against a lot of teams and do really well against bad teams such as the Bears, especially teams with bad O lines. And that's what the Chargers are known for. So if you're ever thinking about a team defense, I believe Los Angeles is available. The Chargers defense is actually going to be a pretty good option if they're against teams that have bad O lines. If they're playing against even a bad team that has a really good O line, say like let's think here, here's a bad team that has a good O line. Let's say the Browns, whenever they're using a third string quarterback, the Chargers defense will suck that game. But if you play them against a really good team with a bad O line, let's think here, who's a good team with a bad O line that I can really think of? I can't really think of one right off the top of my head, but either way, if you can find a team that has a really bad O line that's still a good team, that's when the Chargers will do good because they'll rack up the sacks for sure. Um, you could argue the Bengals kind of, even though I don't think they're playing the Bengals, but the Bengals are a pretty strong offense, sure, and they might put up some good points depending on the week, but either way, the Chargers are probably going to be bullying whatever quarterback they're against on any given basis, and that could be a sneaky pickup for a fantasy side of things going forward in the upcoming weeks here. Um, and other than that, I think that's about it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later for the Raiders and Lions game or WWD. Have a good one.